Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world. From border to border, coast to coast, and all the ships at sea, I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning in to the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. Our mission is simple. We're searching for beneficial disruption in healthcare from emerging technologies. I'm really pleased today that my guest is Kathy Ford. Kathy is the President and Chief Product Officer at Rhinogram, and she's certainly a veteran of the healthcare industry with over 20 years of experience. She's held multiple roles at such companies as GE Medical Systems, McKesson, Siemens Medical, Carestream Dental, and others. So first, Kathy, welcome to the Tate Chronicles, and thanks for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really pleased to be here with you today.
You know, I've done some research. I've been to the website, Rhinogram, and I'm really fascinated with the technology and the potential for practice and clinic workflows communicating between patients and providers. First, tell me a little bit, how did you become involved in Rhinogram?
It's a great question. So, as you noted, that I've been in healthcare for, actually, I think I'm approaching my 25th year now. And having spent a fair amount of time in working on and commercializing solutions around EHRs and imaging technologies, I'd say the last 8 or so years I've kind of transitioned and really been more focused around ambulatory based solutions. And I did this purposefully, knowing that care has been moving out of acute into ambulatory or outpatient care. It's less expensive. It has proven to show better outcomes than having patients stay in hospitals if you can avoid it. So that being said, I was on the market looking for my next opportunity, and Rhinogram approached me, and so I joined Rhinogram because of the alignment around common interests. So wanting to continue to create solutions and commercialize solutions that are going to solve real problems in healthcare. And we all know that there are plenty of those to go around. But for me specifically, I have been concerned about the cost of care and the access to care in the outpatient space over the last many years. And when I got to know Rhinogram, both from a solution and platform perspective, but also when I met the founder, Dr. Keith Dressler, I knew that this was a solution and a company and a mission that I wanted to be a part of. And knowing that things like the patient portal has been around for a long time, and still has not proven to be the best way for patients to stay engaged. And so ultimately, I looked at Rhinogram and said, this is a $1 billion idea in a $1 trillion market, and I want to be a part of it.
One thing you mentioned there, Kathy, is the patient portals. And I spent a long time in the ambulatory environment also, and it started off where if a patient wanted to communicate some information to their provider, they would call the practice and be triaged to a nurse or somebody else who would write a little note on a stick-it note and stick it on a hard chart and put it in a box for a physician to see sometime. And then once we got the portals, the portal was a good step forward. Really loved the portals. But then we're finding, how people actually choose to communicate, whether it's with providers or somebody else. And a lot of us email a lot, but a lot of folks, especially who are younger, though it's growing the demographic, never email, they just text. So when I saw the text capability of Rhinogram, I was really fascinated about that. So how would a practice actually use, some of the features to enable that patient-provider contact, with the least amount of friction as possible?
Yeah, exactly. Completely agree. Portals certainly serve a purpose, and agree, having been in this space when there were no portals, and then as portals started to be developed and adopted, and then became a part of meaningful use, and incentives, help to maybe further, create some or drive adoption there. The bottom line is that it's not convenient, and I think that I really do believe that consumerism is the biggest disruptor right now in healthcare. And we can thank all of the other services outside of healthcare, I think, to have gotten us here, like Uber and Amazon and, Airbnb and everything essentially online. So we're now more accustomed, or I say we're very accustomed to getting what we want, when we want it, and the way we want to get it. And, why can't we have that same convenience in healthcare? And so, the reality is that we do everything on our phones. And when you look at texting, just kind of generally speaking as a form of communication, I think there's a statistic out there that's been out for a while. I think it's around 99% or 99.1% of all text messages are opened within, I think, 3 to 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So that they're not only nearly all of them are open, but they're opened nearly right away. And then when you look at the same data around email, it's like 20%. And so, portals are essentially a secure email, environment, let's just say. So, Rhinogram kind of came about because of the fact that the portal is just not the best way to engage with patients, but texting is. And so the way Rhinogram works is so we text enable a practice's phone line or phone lines. So no workflow change from a patient's perspective, no app to download, nothing to log into. They simply just pull up, the practice's phone number in their contact or in their address book on their phone, and instead of calling, they can text. And that text then goes into the Rhinogram application, which is, of course, HIPAA secure. We're actually ONC certified as well, so we kind of took the next step to further securing and encrypting, and then also creating the appropriate logging so that facilities can also be eligible for additional reimbursement, through the meaningful use criteria. But essentially, that patient can have the texting conversation with the clinicians, with the providers, with the administrative staff, billing, scheduling, whomever is the right person to respond or communicate with the patient at the most convenient time for both the patient and the practice.
And one thing that I'm really interested in, Kathy, is how these text messages are triaged. Some could be a request to be seen. Some could be to schedule an appointment or refills, or some could be more clinically important than others. How does that take place?
Yeah, so true. So Rhinogram has workflow elements, and one of which we call smart routing. So when messages come in, they can either go directly to a group or an individual, or they can also go into kind of a main central triage location, like, say, the front desk or main, or maybe it's a person, and then are routed off to the right people based on who needs to answer the question. There's also notifications capabilities, and so if you're, for example, a physician on call for the weekend or for an evening, especially for our practices that have a lot of post-procedural follow-up focuses, it's a great way for the patient to feel like they have direct access to their doctors without, of course, anybody in violation of PHI on their personal phone. And the physician can, again, be responsive to that patient, but in a really convenient and non-say disruptive way, especially if the patient just has some questions, is this normal, so on and so forth. And so it really helps to put the patient at ease and make it convenient for, say, the doctor in that situation. But the routing really is what helps to provide so much additional efficiency for the practice. I'd also tell you that when you talk about the sticky notes and all that good stuff with traditional charting and workflow within a practice, a lot of all the years I've spent in practices, kind of understanding the nuances of what goes on minute by minute, hour by hour, there's a lot of walking around, and it's just become kind of understood or expected. And a lot of it is asking quick questions. This patient's on the phone, they need a refill. Can they, eat this with this medication? Are you coming in this Friday? This patient needs a prescription in order to be discharged. Lots of things like that where you see people walking around. Within Rhinogram, we also have a team chat capability, which allows staff to compliantly, securely communicate about a patient, so discussing PHI, without ever getting up. And you'd be surprised when you think about, even if walking down the hallway takes you 2 minutes, if you do that 20 times in a day, it actually can add up to a significant amount of time, and then less time saved if you're using Rhinogram.
So on the provider side, would there, excuse me, as far as the triage, would there be somebody at the practice who maybe would have a screen open and text messages appear there, and they would decide how to triage those?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a complete, cloud-based solution. So any browser on any device, your phone, your computer, your iPad, whatever the user is using, they would be working within the Rhinogram application. And we also integrate with EHRs, and so if it's an existing patient and they're messaging in and it's coming into Rhinogram, then the staff is going to know who that patient is, because we'll link up that phone number and positive patient ID with the EHR record, and so staff will know who this patient is. And then if it's a new patient that's messaging in because they're asking questions and they see on the website that they don't have to just call, they could also text. When that prospective patient or prospective patient then becomes a patient and they're loaded into the EHR, we'll also merge those conversations and they'll become known.
So I can see during regular practice business hours having that triage person there, but then after hours or on the weekend, is it just a configuration setting, so maybe all text would just go to the provider on call? Is that how that would work?
That's exactly right. There are a couple options, or say ways that you can choose to set it up, one of which is as you mentioned, so you can you can identify certain patients to be routed to certain people over a certain time frame. There's also an out-of-office setting, so you can, if a patient is messaging in after hours because that's what's most convenient to them, so they need to change an appointment, then you can set up an after-hours message so that they know that you're not going to be responding until the next day or whatever you want that message to be. And then, of course, you can kind of identify who wants to be triaging after hours and rotate that around. We have some practices doing that as well, just to be, uber responsive, let's just say, in some competitive markets.
I'm really, as I talk to you, Kathy, I see more and more potential for this type of technology really solve some of the workflow issues. So let me dig a little deeper into some of the capabilities. Let me give you a scenario, and you would tell me how this would potentially work. So let's say a text message comes in, and it goes to a nurse who's handling incoming calls, and it is a patient who wants to know whether they should continue their current treatment, maybe taking prednisone or something like that. And that triage individual could send it to the physician, and the physician doesn't want to make a decision right there. They want maybe a nurse to actually call the patient and talk over some details with them. So can that provider then in some way attach or forward that text to a nurse to do a follow-up call, something like that?
Absolutely. That's exactly one of the common ways that the application is used, where what we would refer to as a conversation comes in and can be moved around to a number of different folks, and then you can directly respond to that patient, and then you can forward it on or assign it to another staff member for another action, and then say that action has been completed after any number of, say, jumps or stops it makes to different staff members. That conversation is then closed out. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, because all the actions have been taken care of, but they're never gone. So what Rhinogram is a permanent patient communication record. So just like an EHR is a permanent clinical record, we're the permanent communication record. So you always have the ability to go back and view all the conversations, access them, of course, and reference them if needed.
Sure. Is there any requirement? Do patients have to download an app on their smartphone or at all? Or
no. What really makes this no barrier to communication between patient and provider is the fact that they literally just text in like they do everybody else in their lives. And what Rhinogram also offers is consent management. And so what you need to do is, because we don't encrypt, the airwaves, so to speak, that there is always some, just like, even if you're emailing or what have you, there's you do need to provide or you need to gain consent from patients that they're okay with this form of communication. And so we have a template, and our practices then can quickly send that template. The patient can respond yes, and then we indicate that they have provided consent to the practice, and then everybody who is communicating with a patient can see that consent badge or indicator. We call it a badge. And then if the patient chooses not to consent, that's also indicated in the platform. So again, staff knows, what kinds of conversations they can have and not have and be compliant.
I'm really interested in how your communication platform can be integrated into an existing practice. So if there's an existing practice there that's doing everything by phone or maybe by portal, and they decide to, for reasons of productivity and better healthcare communication, to move to the Rhinogram platform, there's probably still going to be some folks who are calling in, and communicate in various different ways. How do you advise practices to introduce Rhinogram and to start weaning people over towards it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so also a great question. So first off, the beauty of Rhinogram is it truly does reduce phone call volume pretty significantly. We see, usually within about the first quarter, a solid reduction rate of anywhere from 20% or greater of phone call volumes going down. And it's not because patients are going away. In fact, we also see new patient acquisition and patient engagement going up, and we measure these things because of, again, it's super convenient. You don't have to log in and anything, and patients love it. But staff also loves it because I talk about the consent template. The system also supports essentially an unlimited number of templates that each practice can design and use, and people can have their favorites depending on what part of the practice you work in, and that really allows two things. One, what's already pretty quick to do, which is to message back or text somebody back or short message them. You can make that even shorter. It could be seconds, literally, rather than say 20 seconds of typing out, yes, Mary, we do take, the following insurance, plans, for example. So staff can pull up those templates and customize them if they want to and fire them off really, really quickly. It also allows the practice to kind of drive some quality around how they want to communicate on kind of regularly asked questions. But what it does is also allows the staff to be messaging somewhere between 6 to 8 to 10 patients almost at the same time. So when I say that phone call volume goes down, it's because that sort of efficiency is being is really being realized. So once staff starts to understand that the not only the noise of the phone, but also just the inconvenience of calling people back and voicemails and phone tag and all that other good stuff, they really do love it. There is a natural process that has to take place. It's certainly not magical that patients just learn that they don't have to call or that they have other options. And so we help practices also. We have a kit as far as helping them market the fact that they can be texted and what kinds of things they can text. So they can take pictures of things and send documents back and forth. All of that is supported on our platform. So we encourage our customers to advertise on their website, to put posters in their waiting room, any way that they're already communicating with patients, to continue to advertise that they now have the ability to text. So there is that process of educating. But I'll tell you, for practices that are looking to grow their patient base, and they're using Facebook business page to also advertise their practice, we are integrated with Facebook Messenger. We're one of the very few platforms that have this capability. And this is important because of, as you mentioned earlier, that younger generation that really is quite active in Facebook and uses Facebook Messenger in the rest of their lives. When they're out there reading reviews and getting suggestions from their friends about which doctor to go to and who has the best experience, they're in Facebook already. So why not be able to hit the message button, and anything they ask and all of those questions and conversations are routed into the Rhinogram platform, so staff doesn't have to worry about whether now they have to do a PHI that they weren't expecting, number one, because it's all secure, and number two, they don't have to get into another system to basically respond to those inquiries coming in off of Facebook Messenger. So again, it's a nice way to consolidate, route, and in a convenient way for staff to address any kind of incoming questions about the practice.
I started using Facebook Messenger about a year or so ago, and it's really convenient. You don't have to be on Facebook. You can just use the Messenger app.
That's right.
So that's great. You have more than just a phone number. You can just go in through the Messenger platform.
Exactly.
Now, you also mentioned the potential to integrate with EMRs. How does that take place?
So we have already completed a number of integrations with the usual suspects. Plus, we just recently announced at the MGMA that we have been accepted into the Athena App Store, as it's known. So we have that direct communication with the Athena ambulatory solution. And so essentially how it works with all of these EHRs and practice management systems that we're integrated with is we take essentially patient demographic data, and we'll also take appointment data because we do have the capability to support appointment reminders, and we do it in a sort of unique way. So if you want to use our appointment reminder, communication approach, that's an option. But we essentially pull that data in out of the EHR through your typical integration, whether it's HL7 or APIs or FHIR.
Sure.
And then we pull that in, and then depending on the EHR, we also have the ability to send those conversations back into the clinical encounter. So especially if you look at the expansion of telehealth and reimbursement codes supporting asynchronous technology modalities like Rhinogram. So a clinical conversation can take place, especially for virtual consults and virtual check-ins, and that can be reimbursed, and that clinical conversation can be sent back in for reference and coding.
Kathy, unbelievably, the time has passed so quickly. We only have a couple of more minutes, so a couple of things I want to touch base with you about. I see that you now have a radio channel called Talkin Healthcare on Healthcare Now Radio. When did you start that, and what's that going to be about?
We started that October 1st, and it is really our mission is to help to continue to educate our industry and market around the expansion and the growth of telehealth as an industry overall. And so there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of misnomers, I would say. Telehealth has come a long way. It's not your it's not your grandfather's telehealth, as I like to joke. It's not provider to provider and video only. That's we've long evolved from that, and but I think a lot of folks don't know that. So we're talking about all sorts of things from regulation to use cases to consumerism and adoption and everything in between. So that's our focus, and we've got one out there and another one that's coming out in, I think, about 10 days or so.
Well, that's great. I know that that show's program page can be found at healthcarenowradio.com. Unbelievably, we're totally out of time. Thanks for joining me on this episode. To our audience of the Tate Chronicles, I offer a special salute to my guest, Kathy Ford of Rhinogram. Kathy, thanks for coming aboard today.
Jim, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.